Welcome to As the Story Grows. I'm Brent Patton. Today I'm stoked to finally share my chat with Sean Leary, frontman for Loma Prieta. Loma's new album, Last, is out this Friday, June 30th, on Deathwish Inc. Sean talks about how becoming a musician felt inevitable, the term screamo, the weirdness of recording during COVID restrictions, joining Jeromes Dream, and more. Sean was a delight to talk to, and I love the new Loma record. Make sure you grab a copy and give it a spin on Friday. So I hope you enjoyed today's chat with Sean Leary from Loma Prieta. It's always good. I put on your discography on my phone, so it was like a good way to like cram everything before I come and chat. Like,
yeah, get in the headspace.
Yeah,
totally.
How you doing?
Dude, I'm good. I'm just starting the day. I'm on the West Coast, so it's 9 out here. Been up for a couple hours, just just chilling, man. I'm having a slow day. I don't have to work, so.
It's always nice.
Yeah.
Thanks for hanging out early in the morning. I always appreciate it.
Dude, yeah, it's the best time, I think, actually. I'm like, all right, I'm fresh. My brain is as good as it's going to be, you know?
For sure. It's kind of one of those situations where, like, the stars align because Jeff from Jeromes Dream, my chat with him aired Wednesday.
Oh, cool.
With their new record coming out today. We talked about Loma, interviewing him, obviously.
Yeah.
So it's cool that now you're here.
Right. Yeah.
So it's awesome.
I'm glad you reached out, man. This is great.
Yeah. So you're out on the West Coast. Is that where you grew up?
I grew up like an hour north of San Francisco.
Nice.
Yeah.
What was childhood like for you?
Dude, it was good. I mean, I think back on it and I'm like, I think I was pretty fortunate in a lot of ways, to grow up where I did. And, I kind of grew up, I was an only child and I grew up basically with a single mom. And I was like out living in the country and my mom basically kind of like got her life together when I was like, I think she was sort of wilding out until I was 3 or 4.
Yeah. Which
is kind of when I start having memories. So it's like her stories about my early childhood are that things were kind of fucking crazy and, she kind of just got all like into all this like new agey like Zen kind of stuff and got sober and kind of like took control of her life when I was a little kid and started going to college. She was like in her early 30s at the time. So my childhood was basically like me out in the country. My mom was just gone. Like I feel like I kind of raised myself in a lot of ways, but that sounds like a sob story and it's not like that at all. It was like just, it was a different time too. I'm like, I was born at the beginning of the 80s and I feel like kids were still like, there were like latchkey kids when I was a kid. That was totally normal. Yeah. So anyway, that was kind of my upbringing. My mom's an artist and, now teaches painting for a living and stuff. So I was around a lot of, weirdo, creative Northern California people growing up. And I think it sort of like led to when I started to like kind of cultivate my own, identity, I guess, like, when I was 12 or 13, I really gravitated towards people that were into music and art. And, it seems, I think back on it and I'm like, well, the logical, like, it makes total sense that I am where I am now,
Yeah, for sure. What got you into music?
I just loved music for as long as I can remember, like as a little kid being really attached to certain records. And I think both my parents, like neither of them are musicians, but they both kind of react to music in the same way that I think musicians do. Like there was definitely, their identities were both tied up in music that they liked. And like my dad, like always was going to shows and stuff. Which is funny because he was, my dad was like 50 in his early 50s when I was born.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
so I think back on it and I'm like, dude, it's crazy because he was always sort of like, yeah, man, I saw Van Morrison was playing when I was driving by this club the other night. So I just stopped and went in and bought a ticket and, like, or scalped a ticket or whatever.
Oh,
He
man,
was like
that's wild.
always like, he was just like that kind of dude that loved, just a very like experiential kind of guy. Like he was always just down for whatever and very much like like freewheeling, which doesn't make for like, he wasn't a bad dad, but I'm like, dude, this guy just did not have like anything holding him down. So that's kind of like, it's a good and bad role model to have, but definitely as far as music was concerned, it was super cool to have him around. And he would like, even when he was like in his 70s and stuff, he was like turning me on to cool indie shit and stuff. I'm like, dude, It's so weird to think back on because I'm, now in my like early 40s and I'm like, I don't feel like I am finding out about as much music as for some reason my dad was when he was like 75. But I don't know, maybe he had more free time than I do. I don't know.
Yeah. Or some early records or things that made you want to grab a guitar or start bands?
I think when I was growing up, it was like, my mom is funny because she's super into music, but I feel like a lot of us, she never really progressed past what she loved when she was like 16, So It was like anything, it was basically like she, loved the Beatles because they came out when she was like 9 or whatever. And she like saw them play live a couple times, like legendary Candlestick Park shows in San Francisco and stuff. So I grew up really loving the Beatles, which is, that's sort of a divisive topic in the punk world, right? Like everyone is like, fuck the Beatles. And I don't, it's like, I understand the conversation about the Beatles are overrated and all this stuff, but like, it was just the first thing, like some of my first memories are just like of listening to Beatles records and being like moved by, I think there's like just crazy melodies happening in a lot of those songs and stuff.
Yeah.
So that would be the first thing. Like I remember being really little, like 4 or something, and just wanting to figure out how to play music because I liked those songs so much. And a lot of it was like, I remember solo stuff, John Lennon's solo stuff, and, even Paul McCartney's solo stuff, which I now just like, I can't deny is fucking cheesy, but, that was what was playing a lot, stuff like that. And like Neil Young, a lot of Neil Young and Van Morrison. And then kind of once I got to be a little older, well, I have like an older half brother who's 16 years older, from my dad's side. And when I was a little kid, like some of my other early memories are like, so he would have been like 18 or 19 and he would like drive me around in his car and play stuff. And it was like, dude, just like AC/DC and a lot of new wave stuff. And he played in a band at the time too. And like Prince, stuff like that. REM. And so, yeah, my brother playing in a band and playing me this, music that was definitely not the Beatles probably had a huge influence too, And he was kind of like I remember him playing like, Public Image Limited, like bands that were like punk adjacent, you know what I mean? B-52s and stuff like that. So I had some concept, there was stuff happening, but, yeah. So I guess, I always kind of was like, it seemed inevitable that I would figure it out and play music somehow,
Yeah. Yeah. What got you into like punk or hardcore?
Probably. I mean, I think like most people my age, it was sort of like, I was probably 10 or 11 when like Nirvana got huge. Mm-hmm. And I'd already been I feel like I was into Metallica first, probably, So it's like, these are the things where they're like the primer where it was like, because to me as a little, I think about it now, I'm like, 9 or 10 listening to stuff like that. And, that kind of made it really easy. Like once I heard punk music, I was like, well, pop to me was like Nirvana, you know what I mean? So then it wasn't a huge leap to like when I first heard local punk bands or heard like, I remember a kid at school made me a tape of Black Flag Damaged, when I was probably in 7th or 8th grade. And it's like thinking about it now, I'm like, well, that's pretty like, challenging music, I guess, like sonically, you know, but it just seemed totally normal to me. And I guess it represented something that seemed appealing too, you know? So it was really like that stuff. It was like it went from being into basically like the grunge stuff or whatever of the era, getting into Sonic Youth and stuff like that too. And then starting going to local punk shows that were bands that never really made it out of the area where I grew up. But that stuff was super inspiring too, because I was just learning to play music. And I think punk does this thing where like you'll see bands who are not that far above your skill level as like a 13-year-old, but they're writing really good songs. Like the energy is crazy, you know? It's like, you're like, this seems attainable. Like me and my friends could, if we really apply ourselves, we could do a really bad version of this, you know?
Right.
And so I think that's basically how it was. Like I was lucky to grow up in, I mean, I grew up in a town that was out in the country and really it wasn't a sophisticated place at all, but there was like a punk scene. There was a venue, which is still there. It's a super cool place that was like an old movie theater that basically is, you know, it's kind of wild that it's there, but yeah, it's just a big empty theater that's like covered in graffiti, and they have like a half pipe in there and stuff. And
nice.
They were cool. Like when I started playing in bands, you know, when I was 14 or 15, it was like we could go play shows there every month or two.
Yeah.
You know, to no one. And it was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. I always hate like just sitting here and like romanticizing like the old days, but like there was something special if you had like a good local scene where it's like you're at the VFW hall and there's like the touring headliner and then like all the local bands that could be your friend or your band. And it's just like a different sort of energy of just like, we could do it.
Dude, 100%. Yeah. I mean, it was super motivating. And it's, you know, I feel like lucky, I guess, that I had that, you know, it kind of like kept me out of trouble, I think, because I had my instincts as a teenager were to like, you know, I think I was just kind of hyperactive and I could have, you know, things could have been worse, but I was like very focused on, like weirdly focused on like trying to be good at music, I guess, you know, like my whole identity got tied up in it as soon as I started playing. And then I had, you know, it was like I had a couple friends that I worked on music with and we were all like psychotic about it, you know? So it's like a good thing that happened to me, because I'm like, damn, man, like I could have gotten mixed up in some other shit, but I really, you know, I really wanted to make that happen.
How did Loma get started?
We got started, I met two of the guys. I met Val, the drummer, and Derek, who is our other guitar player for the first couple records. I met them because it's kind of funny. There's like a Jeromes Dream connection in here, like which is weird now that I'm playing in Jeromes Dream. But basically, I got an email. I was playing in this band that was called Archaeopteryx that started, I think, in like '99, and probably around 2001 or 2002, I got an email from this dude, and he was like, "Hey, you know, you don't know me, but my band is booking a show, and Jeff from Jeromes Dream's new band, the Wind Up Bird, is going to play. Like, does Archaeopteryx want to play?" And I was like, you know, Jeff from Jeromes Dream's new band? Fuck yeah, I want to play, you know, because I love Jeromes Dream. And so we showed up to the show. It was kind of in this weird area that's, you know, 90 miles from San Francisco or something. So it was kind of out in the sticks in this college town. We showed up to the show and this guy, Derek, was like, "Oh man, yeah, Jeff's band actually couldn't play. But anyway, we're doing the show." And so we played with them. Their band was called Sailboats, and they were, you know, everyone look them up, dude. Sailboats. I think they have one song online. It's like one of the best, you know, weird emo songs of the era. yeah, we played with their band and they were just so good. And so I just stayed in touch with Derek and Val, and probably a year or two later, I think Val came to like another Archaeopteryx show at Gilman, and we were talking, and I was sort of like, dude, we live like 10 miles from each other. Maybe we should try and play music sometime. And, I kind of had no concept that was going to lead to, I mean, that's like almost 20 years ago. We played once and then that was it.
Where'd the name come from?
It was the name of the earthquake that happened out here when I was a kid, 1989. There was a big earthquake in the Bay Area.
Yep.
And the fault line is called Loma Prieta. And so that was, that was the name of the earthquake. And so it was kind of like, we were kicking around names for 6 months or something. It was really hard to agree on a band name. And then I think that I'm trying to remember. It was like one of those things where I heard like on news radio or something, someone mentioned that the anniversary of Loma Prieta was coming up. And I was like, man, that's a really beautiful, like out of context, it's sort of a beautiful, like pairing of words,
Yeah.
I didn't really know what it translated to, I knew it was Spanish. And yeah, I kind of pitched it, and it was funny, like, because Val's family, are Mexican, and so he like grew up speaking Spanish, and he was like, I really like the name, but everyone's going to mispronounce it. Like he was really opposed to it because he was like, I don't want it to be like, I don't want us to use like have like a Spanish name, then have everyone say it like you say it. And I'm like, what, Loma Prieta? And he's like, yeah, dude, that's not how it's pronounced. But anyway, everyone does, pronounce it in a very, English speaker way, but I don't know any other way.
Yeah.
What am I going to
do? Yeah. What led you guys to that like screamo sound that like, I mean, you mentioned being a fan of Jeromes Dream, but what led you guys to that style of music?
Dude, I don't know. I mean, for me, well, it's funny because I think I sort of like never took the term or the genre name like screamo very seriously. I still don't,
Sure.
And I've always, I think when I was growing up and getting into hardcore, it was like, I knew that I wasn't really interested in, like what was drawing me in more with like heavy, noisy punk stuff was that it felt like the most, like forward thinking, crazy music that I had found,
Yeah.
And so it was like, I was getting super into like Gravity Records bands, Antioch Arrow and Click a Tat and, like early Locust and stuff like that. And
yeah.
But at the same time, I was super into like Aphex Twin and, like Dead Sea, like just like more, electronic stuff that to me felt like it was totally aligned with that same thought process musically, like just boundary pushing, challenging, heavy stuff. And then I started kind of hearing or seeing in zines that people were calling this stuff screamo, which I think I always took basically as more of a diss, like I was like, it seemed like it was like people trying to categorize music they didn't like. Like they're like, I like hardcore, but then there's also this stupid shit called screamo, like, so I kind of felt like I never heard bands identifying themselves as that until much later. Like, I don't feel like anyone was saying like our genre is screamo until, maybe the late 2000s or something, like it was sort of like you had to be a generation removed from knowing that it was actually like a disparaging term. But I guess as far as like playing that kind of music, I think that that was kind of a cool thing about meeting the guys from Loma Prieta, because we all had sort of different backgrounds, and I'm like 3-4 years older than those guys. And so they kind of turned me on to a lot of stuff that I hadn't listened to. And then also I think I was sort of like, kind of like had this like elitist attitude where I was like I remember they were like into At the Drive-In, and I was like, that shit sucks. And then like, we had to listen to it on tour in the van, and I was like, oh yeah, I get it. This is pretty good. I just didn't want to like it because it was like too big to be punk or something to me,
Yeah.
So yeah, I just think we had a lot of similar musical background, and those guys were just way more internet savvy than I was too. So I think that it was like, I remember Derek making me these like MP3 CDs that just had like a ton of shit I'd never heard, and turning me on to a lot of like obscure European, well, I guess what you call screamo that I'd missed.
Sure. Yeah.
So those guys like broadened my horizons a lot too. Like in the first, I think we started practicing a little bit in like 2004, and in that first, just becoming friends with them, it like opened me up to a lot of stuff, because it was way more, my stumbling on things was more haphazard. I think like it was really like ordering stuff from distros, buying stuff from record stores. Like I was just not computer savvy until I like had to be, you know what I mean? Until the world started changing around that time.
Right. Yeah.
So
yeah. It's interesting, like, because I listened back to the discography this morning. It's like the urgency that's in those early like EPs and splits. Like, it's like everything feels so immediate and like happening right now, and it has to be said and it has to be played. And there's like this really frenetic energy about it that I've always been drawn to with like bands of that genre.
Yeah, me too. And yeah, I mean, I remember writing that stuff and feeling that way all the time, kind of. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like everything felt really urgent when we were that age. And on some level, I'm sort of like glad that I feel like if we've achieved anything, it's sort of that we're like better at placing that kind of energy like where it's needed, and also like building up to it, I guess. Yeah. You know, so it's like yeah, we're not just like going at constant urgency all the time.
Yeah.
which could be good or bad, you know, I don't know.
Yeah. It's interesting. Like Last City, I think that track specifically where you're singing on it, and it feels like, you're just like waiting for like the bottom to drop. It's like somebody has your favorite record and then they like smash it or something, right? Just like, oh, you knew it was coming.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I'll take that as a great compliment.
Yeah. How have you seen your writing, whether lyrically or musically, change over the years with the band?
I guess kind of what I was saying. Like, I think that there's a little bit more thought about, kind of about letting things build, letting things breathe. Like, I think that we definitely early on, things were sort of just like riff salad sometimes, you know, and at some point we started realizing, I think that was kind of part of the, like, that was like a trope in that type of music though at the time too. It felt like there's so many bands from the early 2000s that it's just like riff after riff, and songs are totally linear, or like no part ever repeats. It's almost like you had to do that in order to fit into that category of music. So it's, you know, I think all of us started listening to a lot of music outside of just like, you know, progressive hardcore stuff or whatever. And it definitely creeps into the songwriting process. And, but at the same time, we're not a band that sits and goes like, this next record's going to be a post-rock record. There's that, you know what I mean? Like we're pretty much just like get in there and figure it out. It's pretty collaborative, you know, like the way that we've always written is sort of like people come in with ideas, but by the time they like come out the other side and there's a record, you're like, that sounds absolutely nothing like what spawned that song, you know?
Yeah. How'd you guys end up on Deathwish?
You know, I'm not totally like positive about how it happened. I kind of remember it was like two of the guys from Loma, Val and Brian, were playing in this band called Punch. And I think that Deathwish was aware of Punch somehow and was going to do like a 7-inch for them or something. And so when it was like Loma Prieta and Punch were touring together, and I think we just met up with Trey from Deathwish on tour just to like go hang out or something, to go get lunch or whatever. And then I think that made him aware that we were a band. So we'd already, we at the time were like, we put out all of our own records for the first 3 LPs were self-released and, self-financed and everything else. Right. So I think that Trey was sort of like, well, what's up with this other band, Loma Prieta? And Val sent him this record that became IV, which was the first one that came out on Deathwish.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of like, we just recorded that record doing it the way that we'd always been doing it, where we were sort of like, well, for one, I think we weren't totally sure if it was done yet. We were just recording because we had time. We were all playing in other bands that were going to be touring a lot, and Loma was going to be touring a lot. And so it was kind of this funny thing where we had this record, sent it to him just to be like, this is what we sound like. And he kind of immediately was like, are you guys on a label? What are you doing with this record? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
And we're like, if you want to put it out, that'd be, I kind of was sort of like in disbelief, because to me at the time I was like, Deathwish, that's, Jake from Converge's label.
Right.
Why would they want anything to do with a band like ours? You know what I mean? I was like, Obviously I believed in our band and thought, I'm like, this is a good record for us, but it's just like felt like a different world, sort of like, these guys want to deal with some like sensitive ass hardcore like this. But, Converge is a complex band too. And I think that, they are by no means just like, they're a very thoughtful hardcore band. So
right.
I guess once it started to make sense, but my initial thought was like, this seems crazy. Like, why, like our band just is in such a different realm. And, I definitely had, and still always have, mixed feelings anytime we like kind of like give up some part of the band that we've been in control of, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Like it felt weird to kind of be like, wait, now there's a label involved. What are we losing in doing that? But
yeah,
the thing kind of was that, I don't know, it felt like, it felt kind of immediately like they got us, and like it felt friendly immediately, or like a friend was putting out the record, not like, there was no like record deal. There was nothing was like signed. It was just the same as any smaller indie label wanting to put something out, but they just have sort of like this legendary status,
Yeah. After you guys released Self-Portrait in 2015, there's a break. Did you guys break up or go on hiatus, or just quiet there?
Yeah, there was no real like discussion, but I think that, I guess a couple things happened. Like probably one of the major things was our other guitar player, Brian, moved to New York. I guess around then, probably 2015. So it was kind of like that record came out. He moved to New York. And like our bass player had been, and still like our bass player, James, lives in Florida. So it was already like every time we do anything, it had to be like worth someone flying out for, you know what I mean? And basically it kind of ended up in this situation where we're like, well, there's only so much time that people can take from work and whatever else, and from their other bands and projects. And so we kind of have time to like get together and write, or we have time to get together and tour. And I think that we just ended up, for the most part, choosing touring over anything else. And then like I think I just wanted to do some other stuff, like I was just like interested in trying some other styles of music and playing with other people and being in a band that's like consistent, because Loma Prieta, for probably from 2012 on, it was like there was always someone living somewhere else. And I just wanted to be like, I want to be in a band that practices 2 or 3 times a week consistently.
Yeah.
And is just like evolving that way, instead of it sort of being like, there's positives to both, because we kind of fell in this pattern where we would like woodshed. So it'd be like, my bandmates are coming out for 3 weeks, and we're all taking time off work, and we're going in the studio every day and just writing, and that's cool too. Like to get in the mode of like undistracted, uninterrupted, working on music all day, every day for period of time, but
Yeah.
it turned out to be really slow because, we didn't really realize that there was going to be all this time between records. Like we knew we were kind of like, just cool stuff would come up where we'd be like, all right, we were planning on getting together and doing 3 weeks of writing and demoing and stuff, but someone offered to like book us this tour in Scandinavia or whatever. And we're like, well, yeah, we should probably do that. Or bands would reach out and be like, you want to do 10 days on the West Coast? For like, yeah, we should do that. And then suddenly it was like years had gone by and we still hadn't, we'd written like a few songs here and there. And then we'd decide, I think the other thing was like, we went and like started recording this record in maybe 2018 or something. And we'd slowly written maybe 8 or 10 songs. And then we ended up going into like an actual studio to maybe potentially start recording. And then I think we just decided that like we were kind of like, one of these songs is like the right direction, but the rest of this stuff just doesn't feel like us. And it's just not, we did basically kept throwing away stuff. So now I'm like, well, we finally just put out this record that's basically 10 tracks. And I'm like, there probably are, 20 tracks on the cutting room floor that like over the course of years didn't, just like weren't. Some of the songs I think are great. They just sort of like don't go with anything else. And it's kind of nice to be in the position just to be like, we don't care, we don't care. We're not on like an album cycle. It's fine. Like we're going to wait until we write some songs until we have a group of songs that feel like a record, feel complete. And then also, this record has basically been done for a couple years now, and it just took forever to like press the vinyl.
Oh yeah.
And like, the label wanted it to come out at a certain time, like it probably could have been out 6 months ago, but they're like, there's other things on the schedule. There's optimal timing to consider. So that part's been hard because really like we finished tracking this stuff like maybe early 2021. It's been like 2 years of basically being in limbo. But I guess the positive part is like when you finish making a record, for me, like I get so immersed that by the time you get like the final masters or whatever, you're like, I fucking hate this. I never want to do this again. But it's been so long since that moment that now I'm back to like, I put the record on the other day and I'm like, yeah, it's pretty good, man. Like I've had enough time to forget all the pain and misery that went into making it. And now I'm just like, yeah, man, guitars sound sick, dude. Good tone. Cool. Into it.
Yeah. Did COVID give you guys the time to like rethink the record and write something you were more happy with?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it was kind of like, it sort of worked in our favor to some degree. It was like a weird, it's hard for me to say, but it did feel like it really brought a lot of things into focus. And like, for me personally, as soon as the like lockdown happened, I basically was like, okay, well, I can't go to work right now. Like I'm effectively laid off. So I'm going to like spend every day, all day working on music, which is something I just like haven't had time to do, So I work quite a bit and play in a lot of bands, but a lot of playing in bands is just sort of like minutia, like going to practice is not always like a creative part of your musical life. Playing shows is not a creative part of your musical life.
Right.
So, I do think like maybe 3 or 4 of the songs on that record, like I wrote kind of early on in the pandemic. And then, we were, after a few months of the pandemic, like we started getting in the studio and working on stuff together, but it was like, it felt sketchy, like it was the kind of thing where we're like masked up and, trying to stand as far away from each other in the studio as possible. And like, I mean, we kind of had an agreement where it's like, none of us are hanging out with anyone else. Mm-hmm. It seemed as low risk as possible, like we were like, well, what are we going to do? Do we need to practice? And then tracking the record was super weird because we were doing basic tracking like December 2020, which was like this massive like COVID surge where they put us all kind of like back on lockdown. And it was like if you're going to be out of your house after dark, you have to have like a note, you have to have like clearance to do that. Just, it felt crazy. So we like went to record with Jack Shirley, and it was sort of like, he has this big, awesome studio with all these different booths and stuff. And so we were attempting to kind of like record a record while none of us were like in breathing the same air, it'd be like, all right, like you be in the vocal booth and like you be over in that other weird booth with the piano. And then like the drums are in the main room and you're kind of just seeing each other through windows and stuff. Cause you're just like, you got to do what you got to do. And at that point, I think about it now and I'm like, dude, how was I just like in the studio for 10 or 12-hour days, like masked up and not having that like affect the way you just, recording is such an uncomfortable thing in the first place. So it's weird to think about, but then I'm like, oh yeah, I was just so used to wearing a mask all the time, I guess. And, and blocking out the idea that you could get super sick. So we got through it, and I guess some of that anxiety probably shows through, and that's probably a good thing because it goes back to that kind of like what you're talking about with sort of like the urgency of the music that we make. And I'm like, well, if anything's going to kind of make you sound urgent, it's that you like are afraid of dying or whatever,
The album is out June 30th. It's called Last. Where'd the title come from?
We were kind of kicking it around even with Self-Portrait. It was, I think, like the original proposed title. And it just seemed like a cool double, maybe triple meaning. And it's sort of, we kind of have this wordplay thing oftentimes too with song titles where like there's recurring themes or like parts of one song title become another song title and things. So we were like, well, we have Last City. Now we have Last. It's sort of like intentionally confusing, I think.
Were there any lyrical themes or things you found yourself writing about for this record?
I think there are definitely like recurring themes, and I'm actually like sort of distant from it to a degree. Like the headspace that I was in when I was writing the lyrics was, a lot of it was like during early in the pandemic. And then also, we had a kind of a close friend of the band died like, right. Yeah. In like April 2020.
Damn. So
a lot of there are a couple songs that are sort of about that because it was a really complicated scenario. And he ended up taking his own life, and like, we all went way, way back. I mean, I went back with him further than Loma Prieta, but he was, really involved with the band, especially early on. So it was kind of like, I would say that factors into a lot of the songs, but not all of them, like I've never been, I never tried to like write a thematic record. It's sort of like every song sort of has its own feeling, and I'm trying to work within that, I guess. Like I'm trying to pull from, it's like I'm writing all the time, and sometimes it's not towards lyrics, like I just like to, things pop in my head, I write them down. But I often look back at, notebooks or whatever, and I'm like thinking about the music, and it's like certain things just seem like they fit the mood or the or heighten the mood of the music or whatever. So the lyrics definitely, you can see the COVID influence because it's a lot of sort of doom and gloom, the world's ending kind of stuff. But I felt that way before COVID, and I feel that way still. So.
How'd you end up in Jerome's Dream?
I guess maybe in like 2018 or something, I got this email out of the blue, and the person on the other end claimed to be Eric from Jeromes Dream, and said, "Hey, I've been aware of Loma Prieta for a while. I really like your music. I play in this band Jeromes Dream. Don't know if you've heard of us. We're reuniting and we're going to play some shows. Would you guys want to play like a show or some shows?" And I was sort of like, dude, someone's fucking with me. Like, there's no way. I was sort of like, Eric from Jeromes Dream is emailing me right now. Like, yeah, dude, I'm down, definitely down to play some shows. And I think that, Jeromes Dream is a band that everyone in Loma Prieta, like, found formative and had love for a long time. So it was sort of a no-brainer. Like, we were like, yeah, let's definitely play some shows with Jeromes Dream. But so I got on the phone with Eric and just to like figure it out kind of, and immediately felt like a real like kinship with him. Like, Eric's just a really cool and interesting guy. And then a couple weeks later, once the tour was sort of moving forward and getting booked and everything, then I got an email from Jeff, and he was like, "Hey man, like, I live in San Francisco. You live in San Francisco, like, surprised we never met. Maybe we should go get a drink or something." So I went and hung out with Jeff, and I was like, this guy's the best. So it's funny because I kind of felt pretty immediately like I was like, oh, cool. Not only do we get to play these awesome shows with Jeromes Dream, but I have some like new friends who are, like, we're just like cool people who are my age and doing the same thing. And, it was kind of like, I'd somehow never crossed paths with Jeff, even though he'd been in San Francisco at that point for 15 years or something. But he had met a couple of my bandmates early on in Loma Prieta, I guess, because they just were all in the same social circle. So it was like I knew he was around. And anyway, yeah, we played a bunch of shows together in 2019. And then kind of like early 2020, Eric called me up and was like, we have these European dates booked. We need someone to play guitar. Would you want to do it? And it was funny because I've been offered that same kind of like slot in people's bands a number of times, and it just never seemed appealing. Like, I'm like what I like about playing in bands is typically like the everything except playing. I'm like, I like writing songs. I like making records. Playing shows is cool, but it's not like, I just have never wanted to do it unless it was my band. You know what I mean? I'm kind of like, I don't want to, I feel like I'd have to fake the energy or something, but I didn't really have to think much about it because it was like, I really like those guys. I really love their band. And so immediately, I was just sort of like, well, yeah, like, we should practice. And if it works, we should do it, like, And so at the time, Eric was living in LA. So he came up and Jeff and I practiced, and it was like, dude, it immediately sounded great. I was like, by the end of a couple hours, I was like, we have a whole set. We sound super good. I mean, on some level, it's like, I fit well into that role because I've listened to their band for a long time, and I'm sure that they've had a lot of influence on the way that I play, so.
Yeah.
And like, their approach to music is, it's funny. It's funny playing with those guys because they have this like level of enthusiasm that is unusual for, it's like I play music with a bunch of people who are my age, and I'm like, most of us are sort of like, we're not like surprised anymore by the results or whatever, you know what I mean? But there's definitely like there's still like a sense of wonder and like just total like enthusiasm that Eric and Jeff both have for music that I'm like, oh, this is refreshing. Like it's the kind of thing where like, I'll have to be at midnight. I'll have to be like, guys, I'm tired. I have to go home. Like, they could just keep playing music forever. And I'm like, that's badass, dude. Like, it's pretty awesome. So anyway, so I was supposed to go on that tour with those guys, and then COVID happened and the tour got canceled. And kind of in the meantime, Eric ended up moving up to San Francisco. And so it was like, Jeff and I would just like get together and hang out periodically. And I guess at some point we decided we'd just go, they kept being like, we just want to go play. And it wasn't really like they wanted to go practice the Jeromes Dream set that I'd learned or something. It was like, they just wanted to play music. I'm like, well, I play guitar, like, fuck it, man. I got a studio. Let's go play. So we just got in there and started just like messing around, and pretty immediately like started writing songs, because it was like, we're like, I don't know, there was no real like purpose. We were just getting in there to turn up and, see what happened. And then it became this weird dilemma where it was like, dude, we have these songs and we're like, we think they're really good songs. Like, we're impressed with what we came up with, but what is this? Like, is it, then it kind of, we demoed them and stuff. We're like, dude, this sounds like if we don't release these as Jeromes Dream songs, then it's weird because it just sounds like Jeromes Dream, like we can start a new band and call it something else. And then it will just be like the new Jeromes Dream band that sounds just like Jeromes Dream. So that was sort of like the tough, like we talked about it for a while. We're like, well, what should we do here? And then it was also like, dude, coming up with a band name that's good, that isn't taken, is like impossible, like that kind of shit. Yeah. So that was sort of like how it went down. We were eventually like, I guess we're writing a Jeromes Dream record,
Well, Jeromes Dream is on tour later this month through June, and then Loma's on tour end of June into early July. What's the rest of the year look like for you after that? Just those shows, or?
There's more touring to be announced. Stuff's just getting worked out, and
nice.
I mean, that's mostly it. Just a lot of playing shows, and hopefully a little bit of creative stuff too, because that's what I want more than anything. But it's cool. It's cool to be at this phase too, because I mean, there's a lot of there's a lot to think about when there's sort of like an album in process of being written and recorded and stuff. And so having just cleared the hurdle of gotten through like two of those, like two bands very intently pushing all that stuff through, and I'm like ready to be done with that for a little while. So I'm kind of psyched that it's like, all right, now both bands get to go out and tour, and hopefully we both play a lot of shows in the next year or two, and carve out some time to keep writing and stuff too. But I'm kind of exhausted from it, honestly. So time to get exhausted from touring.
Thanks for listening to As the Story Grows. Our intro music was written and composed by Jeremy Hunt. The As the Story Grows theme is by Bob Nana. If you like what you hear, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and give us a rating and review. If you'd like to support the show financially, you can join us at patreon.com/asthestorygrows. Be a part of our community and join the ongoing conversation over on Discord. If you enjoy this episode, share it on social media with your friends. Much appreciated, and thanks for listening.
I never felt so young and alive as when I'm diving into a tomb.